Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and draw a hand reacting with an object. So let's start by defining the wrist, the larger section of the hand, the palm, thumb area. And what we want to do is have this doing a bit of a clenched fist onto what could be like a weapon of some kind or a sword handle or something. But the tricky thing I think about this particular pose is really the way the hand compresses around the object. So you want to again remember this relationship difference from finger to finger. So just remember that the fingers fan across, that the knuckles can somewhat align, but they're actually going to. We want to purposely make sure they don't align too much, or it'll start to look too mechanical. And again, that they all act a little bit independently from one another. So I think that's the trickiest thing to really get right with drawing the hand and remembering, because it's so easy to just overly align them through the drawing process. So again, we want to keep in mind that that middle finger is obviously larger, more prominent. So we can almost start there. I generally will. I'll generally start with the most prominent part in the sketch and use that as my placeholder to work through it. Pinky obviously should be a lot smaller, noticeably smaller on both directions. So from here and to here. And this is really why the knuckles can't be perfectly aligned, because since they are different shapes, when they compress, each one of those is going to shift a bit. So you got to make sure that's properly illustrated. So even something like this. So this knuckle will be higher, this will be lower. And we're also going to direct the fingers quite a bit by using the fingernails. So I'll show you that here in a second. So let's get the object that it's holding on to, or the hand's reacting to. So something like this. And then we have to connect the hand back here to the palm. And bring the thumb over to here. Okay, so there's our rough sketch. That gets us started. And now we got to refine this a bit and figure out how we can improve upon this. So I feel like the fingers need to be condensed in more into the palm. So the palm either needs to be drawn larger like this, or we need to move these fingers back, which I think is what we really need to do. So I'm going to go ahead and select these, pull those in tighter. And now we've got our rough sketch into place, and I guess I could rough sketch in the fingernails. And what I really want to make sure to show you here is that the fingernails are a really great way to quickly show the direction of the fingers. So they add an immediate level of depth and direction to the fingers, so you can use those really well for that. And then past this, when we start to refine this, we want to make sure to get rid of these straight lines. So you can see right here and here, all these lines really, I've got too many straight lines. And again, that's going to make it look too technical. So the only place we would want a straight line would be the object it's holding. If not, we're not going to have a very organic looking hand. So we'll get a little bit of that wrist in there. Okay, so now we'll do a soft erase and try to clean this up and refine this a bit more. So let's scale this up so we gotta have a little bit easier time with it. So again, just want to bounce around that line weight a bit. Show some separation there in the shapes. We might even want to get a little bit of the reaction of the skin to the object here. Let's go ahead and ruler in our object. Okay. And I would say with, little parts of this, little differences like this make a big difference, or small adjustments. So for instance, with the nail, you can have the nail go right up to the edge of the thumb, the tip of the thumb, like that. But if you show this little bump that you get from where it recesses down, it looks a lot more believable. So just tiny little details like that make a world of difference. Likewise, you can get a little bit of the edge of the nail in there, and it looks more realistic. So it doesn't have to be very pronounced. In fact, a lot of times when doing this type of stuff, subtlety makes a world of difference. It shows that you know the information's there, but you're not overly illustrating it, like we tend to do in the beginning. We tend to over illustrate every bit of information that we see. But the more you learn to just add subtle hints of it into your work, the more professional it'll tend to look. So like this, you want that knuckle to come up. You don't really want it to be just a rounded shape like that. Kind of want it to come up, taper over, then back down. Even have one side uneven from the other. All these little things make it look a little more believable because it's not so symmetrical, not so overly even from side to side. No, obviously that's symmetry. But even the difference here, so this is a big one. So when the skin hits another area, another part of skin, and it's compressing, you're going to get little folds and things here. So it can be tricky to get these right. So you really want to play around with them, but you just don't want straight lines. So you might get a bit more of a bend here, and it might taper back or angle back the other way. It might get a little shadow there. You really want to play around with that. And then as we get down to here, we want the middle finger to be the most prominent, so we'll start there. And we want to see the change in the direction of the knuckle there. So we'll kind of get some of this in there. Something like that. But again, as it comes up to here and these areas of skin get pushed around, you want to figure out ways to make those lines have a little bit of movement to them, a little bit of variation. Because again, if not, it'll look just too overly technical and not very well thought out. Likewise, you might put one finger in front of the other a little bit, something like that, maybe a little bit more. So I'm constantly nudging these lines around, trying to make it look a bit more believable, a bit more organic, realistic, whatever you want to call it. And again, about the knuckles, I don't want those too overly aligned. They should all kind of be residing at their own angle from one another. And the pinky should be a bit shorter by comparison. Maybe a wrinkle here. Actually, let me space that out. So starting to get there, and hopefully looking a bit correct enough anyways. Get a little bit of the edge of the knuckle there. So again, I'll bring the pad of the hand back. I'll bring a little bit of an edging. Not like that though, sorry. Maybe something like this. I just want a little bit of a wrinkle or something there, because I'm almost envisioning that the hand is bending back onto itself a little bit, or back onto the wrist a little bit. Something like that. And we want some of the wrinkles inside the palm here. And now for the fingernails. So again, I really love putting the fingernails in there because they help add so much depth so quickly. They're really a great dynamic for drawing the hands. You can direct the fingers really well with them. You can add depth with the line weight really well because you can add the little shading from where the skin appears to kind of lump up before it hits the nail there. So just a really great thing. You know, the fingernails are definitely worth getting good at, just because they add so much for such a short amount of time. So, you know, little bits of shadow in there. You know, you can play around with the distance that's in between. Obviously, from this angle, if you bring the fingernails right to the edge of the finger, then you're really going to push the perspective that they're going this way. So again, just a lot of dynamic in that one little area. Now the other thing that you can do as well is you can add just a little bit of lines like this. I oftentimes will, to show the plane change. They can be weighted lines, they can be tapered lines, whatever you really like for your style. But I think they do a lot of good to show that direction that you get in the as the fingers wrap around this object. Now, the other thing that's really important, we won't make this about rendering a whole lot because there'll be other sections where we'll get more into stuff like that, but the little bit of rendering that you do can be highly impactful. So you can do a little bit of a drop shadow from each finger, each little area of the knuckle. You can get a little bit of the lines over here from the knuckles. You could add them to these two, but not these two. Again, that little bit of variation is so important. And then you can add a little bit of drop shadow from areas like this, little round over shadows. They don't have to be very prominent. So again, that whole thing of overdoing stuff, you know, play around with it. Obviously, try some stuff where you overdo it so that you can really see the difference by comparison. But I would say, if nothing else, just add little hints of it and then slowly work into more. And then again, about that variation, you want to have areas where there's a little bit heavier shadow. You want to have areas where there's a little bit more of a bend, you know, rather than that straight line we talked about. So just little bits of that. You want the wrinkles in the fingers to have some variation. If they're all the same weighted line, they won't have nearly the effect that you're after. And so on and so forth. So just like that, we've got a hand that's reacting with an object. And, you know, we can keep taking that further and further. There can be a drop shadow from the fingers onto this, like that. There can be a drop shadow here from the object onto the hand, you know, and so on and so forth. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do the next pose.